He cut off my credit cards, mocked my dreams, and told me I'd be nothing without him. What he didn't know? I was using his money to build the business that would destroy his empire, one client at a time. When I first met Jonathan, he was everything I thought I wanted. Tall, commanding, dressed in suits that whispered wealth and power. He wined and dined me in a world I'd only ever seen in magazines, private jets, rooftop dinners, handwritten notes from luxury boutiques. I was swept off my feet, like every fairy tale had prepared me for this moment. When he proposed just 7 months later with a ring that sparkled like a galaxy, I said yes without hesitation. In the beginning, it was perfect. He made me feel chosen, special. We traveled constantly, and he insisted I leave my job. "You don't need to work anymore," he said. "Let me take care of you. You deserve to enjoy life." At first, I didn't question it. Who would? It felt like freedom. But over time, that freedom became something else entirely. It started small, subtle. He'd get irritated when I spent too much time on the phone with my old coworkers. "They just want to use you for gossip," he'd say. Then came the passive-aggressive comments about my best friend, Mia. She's single, bitter, and jealous. "You don't need people like that in your life." Eventually, the invitations stopped coming. Or maybe I stopped seeing them. When I tried to revisit the idea of going back to work, he laughed. "Why?" he asked. "You've got everything you need right here. What could a job give you that I can't?" My voice caught in my throat. I didn't know how to answer without sounding ungrateful. I told myself it was love, that this was what security looked like, but soon even the money wasn't really mine. Jonathan started giving me a monthly household allowance. He framed it as practicality. "Why should you stress about bills?" But that allowance came with questions, receipts, remarks, about what I spent on clothes, or why I needed a second haircut in a month. I had to ask before buying things I used to purchase without a second thought. When I confronted him about it, tried to express how small it made me feel, he just shook his head with a smirk. "You wouldn't last a week without me," he said. "You've been living in a dream, sweetheart. I gave you this life. Don't forget that." And that's when it hit me. I hadn't been living in a dream. I'd been sleeping through a slow-burning nightmare dressed in designer silk and champagne bubbles. This wasn't love. This was ownership. I was no longer a woman with goals, ambition, and a voice. I was a trophy, displayed, polished, and silenced. That night, I sat on the balcony of our penthouse, staring out over the city that once felt like magic. And for the first time, I saw the truth. I had traded my freedom for security, my independence for approval, my voice for a golden cage. But the thing about cages, no matter how beautiful, they're still cages. And while Jonathan thought he'd clipped my wings for good, he had no idea that I was already planning my escape. I started small. Late at night, after Jonathan had fallen asleep with his phone on his chest and a scotch, glass half empty on the nightstand, I'd tiptoe into the home office, the one he called his study, and open my old laptop. It was hidden behind books on a forgotten shelf, dusty and outdated, but still mine. The first time I powered it on, the familiar startup chime nearly made me cry. That sound was a time machine. It took me back to the version of myself I had buried, the ambitious marketing manager, who once pitched bold ideas in boardrooms, who had a voice, a vision, a plan. And just like that, she was back. At first, it was just research. Quiet, harmless, at least on the surface. I read articles, took free online courses, joined forums under a fake name. I studied the evolution of digital branding, trends in e-commerce, and how influencers had become their own marketing machines. I didn't want to be them. I wanted to build for them. One night, while searching for old legal documents, Jonathan had been careless. As men with unchecked confidence often are, I found it. A dormant trust account in my name. Something set up for tax purposes during our first year of marriage. He had likely forgotten it existed. It wasn't massive, but it was untouched, clean, legal, mine. And it was enough. I didn't spend a dime of it yet. First, I built the foundation. I created a digital alias and registered a brand, consulting agency under a separate entity. I hired a freelance designer and web developer through anonymous platforms. I told them I was managing the project for a discreet client. No one knew it was me. By day, I still played the doting wife. I smiled at fundraisers, wore the diamonds he picked out, and laughed at jokes from men who never bothered to ask what I did. But every free moment, every sliver of time I could carve out, I was building something real, quietly, relentlessly. I contacted former colleagues from burner accounts, reaching out with subtle pitches and genuine curiosity. To my surprise, they remembered me, missed me, trusted me. I offered insight, solutions, strategy, all without attaching a face or a name. The work spoke louder than my identity. Clients came, slowly, then steadily. I funneled payments into a private business account linked to the trust. No money touched our joint finances. Nothing Jonathan could trace because, in his mind, I was still that obedient, silenced woman grateful for his crumbs. But behind the scenes, I was sharpening every skill he tried to make me forget. And no, it wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation, about proving to myself that the woman I used to be wasn't gone. She had simply been sleeping beneath layers of gold and silence. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. Because now, I had knowledge, resources, and a business that was slowly growing in the same world Jonathan thought he ruled. And I wasn't just coming back. I was coming for everything he said I'd never have without him. I named the business Lyra & Co. Elegant, neutral, anonymous. No face, no backstory. Just clean branding and sharp strategy. It sounded like a firm that had been around forever, quietly serving the elite, whispering results in all the right boardrooms. And that was exactly the point. Jonathan's company, Strathmore Creative Group, had been the darling of old money marketing circles for years. Glossy portfolios, endless golf meetings, and bloated fees that clients paid mostly for the name. But the industry had changed, fast, and he hadn't kept up. That's where I came in. Lyra & Co. started with one influencer client, a fashion label looking to rebrand. I gave them sleek strategy, a social-first rollout, and a full redesign for a quarter of what Jonathan's firm would have charged. They were stunned by the results. Then came referrals, and then came the names I recognized, old clients of his. Luxury skincare, boutique hotel, a high-end travel company he once bragged about landing over cocktails, now all quietly shifting over to me. They didn't know it was me, of course. To them, Lyra & Co. was a mysterious, efficient firm run by a brilliant strategist who never showed her face. Just how I liked it. Jonathan started noticing something was off. At first, it was subtle. Missed callbacks, delayed renewals, vague excuses from old clients. He blamed his team, fired his marketing director, hired a PR consultant who barely lasted a month. I watched from the shadows as he doubled down on his outdated tactics, full-page magazine ads, influencer campaigns with no soul, partnerships that reeked of desperation. Meanwhile, Lyra & Co. grew. Every client I took from him wasn't just business. It was a crack in his empire. And I never gloated, never reached out, never left a trace. But every now and then, I'd hear him ranting on calls from the next room, pacing angrily as he tried to make sense of the shift. We're losing to some faceless ghost agency. They're undercutting us. Clients are leaving for a name I've never even heard of. Who the hell is behind Lyra & Co.? I'd sip my tea and smile. He couldn't see it, but his empire was crumbling, brick by brick, client by client, while I sat across the table from him each morning, quietly rebuilding myself from the inside out. He had always believed his last name was the key to everything. But what he never understood was that real power doesn't need a name. It just needs a plan, and mine was working. The unraveling wasn't sudden. It was slow, steady, and undeniable. Like watching a grand chandelier loosen from its ceiling, one crystal at a time. At first, Jonathan dismissed the losses as temporary. "We're just trimming the fat," he told his board. "Clients are flaky these days." But behind closed doors, I could see it breaking him. He started coming home later, face flushed with frustration, jacket crumpled in his fist. He paced through the kitchen like a caged animal, muttering about competitors, loyalty, and backstabbing cowards. He became paranoid, suspicious. He installed new security on his emails, hired private consultants to analyze the data. Nothing. Lyra & Co. remained untouchable, faceless, invisible. "Who the hell are they?" He snapped one night at dinner, slamming his phone on the marble table. "They're taking my clients. Every single one of them. It's like they know my strategy before I even pitch it." I stirred my wine gently. "Sounds personal." He glared at me, then looked away, unaware that the person sitting across from him had built the very storm that was sinking his ship. Then came the gala, a black tie industry event he helped sponsor every year. It was his stage, his safe zone, his opportunity to flaunt what little dominance he had left. I hadn't planned to go, but this time, I accepted the invitation. I wore a sleek black gown, hair swept back. A simple diamond necklace, quiet confidence, no flash. People turned as I entered, not because of my dress, but because of the company I was now known to keep. I'd become someone in the shadows, someone people whispered about at events like this. And that night, the whispers found Jonathan too. He was already tense when I approached the bar. The bartender greeted me by name, Miss Lyra, and poured my drink without asking. Jonathan's head snapped toward me. What did he call you? I turned slowly, met his eyes, and smiled. Miss Lyra, I repeated softly. As in Lyra and Co. He froze. What? No, that's not. He looked at me like I was speaking another language. You're not behind that company. You couldn't, but I did, I said, stepping closer. While you were busy cutting me off, shrinking me down, I was building. I used what you gave me, the trust fund you forgot about, the time you gave me when you said I didn't need to work, and I built something better than yours. His voice dropped to a whisper. You set out to ruin me. No, I said, steady. You did that to yourself. I just gave your clients an alternative. Around us, people had noticed the exchange. Conversation slowed. Eyes shifted. The fall wasn't private anymore. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. And in that moment, everything changed. The man who once said, you wouldn't last a week without me, now stood silent before the woman, who had quietly dismantled his empire. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I just turned to the bartender, smiled, and said, send the next round to Strathmore Creative Group. They've had a rough quarter. Then I walked away. He was still standing there. But the power that walked out with me, the divorce papers were signed in a corner office overlooking the skyline, clean, efficient, emotionless, no tears, no drama, just 2 signatures, a stamped file, and a polite nod from the lawyer I'd hired on my terms. Jonathan didn't fight it. He couldn't. The revelation at the gala had shattered whatever illusion of control he still clung to. His reputation had taken a hit. His client list continued to bleed, and the industry, once obsessed with his name, was now quietly fascinated with mine. Lyra & Co. was no longer just a whisper in the shadows. We were growing fast, too fast to ignore. My face still wasn't public. I liked it that way. But behind closed doors, brands were lining up, drawn to the quiet precision of our strategy, the elegance of our execution, and the story that lingered behind our success. Of course, he tried. One evening, a bouquet of white peonies arrived at my office, my favorite, years ago. No card, but I didn't need one. A few days later, an email followed. I underestimated you. Let's talk. Maybe we can fix this. I stared at the screen for a moment, then archived it without replying. You can't fix something that was never built on equality to begin with. I wasn't bitter. I was free. Free from the weight of his expectations. Free from the quiet belittling. Free from the lie that my worth depended on his approval. I wasn't someone's wife or someone's project anymore. I was a CEO, a strategist, an empire in heels. One morning, after finalizing a partnership with a luxury brand Jonathan once begged to work with, I stepped out of my office to find a young journalist waiting in the lobby, clipboard in hand, nervous excitement in her voice. Miss Lyra, she said, eyes wide. I've been following your agency's rise. People are calling you the mystery mogul of modern branding. Would you ever be open to sharing your story? I tilted my head slightly, amused. What kind of story? She smiled. The real one. The woman behind the empire. The comeback. The truth. I paused. For a moment, I saw the whole journey flash in my mind. Nights spent hidden in a cold office, building in secret while pretending to smile across dinner tables. The betrayal. The humiliation. The fire that came after. The strength I never knew I had. Then I smiled. A slow, confident smile that came not from victory, but from finally standing in my own light. You'll want to write this down, I said, and walked her inside. The world was finally ready for my story, and I was ready to tell it on my terms.